So thank you all very much for joining me, Director of the Center on the Legal Profession, Amanda Packel, the Executive Director, and two of the most distinguished experts on the subject of diversity in the bar that we could possibly provide for you today. Robert Gray is a partner with Hunt & Williams and serves as vice chair of the firm's pro bono committee. His practice focuses on administrative matters before state and federal agencies, and he represents corporate and industry interests in the legislative arena. He was the first African American to be an officer in the American Bar Association and served as the chair of its House of Delegates and later as its president. He's devoted his term during that period to create better justice through better juries and an American Jury Initiative that modernized and consolidated varying forms of juror standards into a single model document that reflects the demands of contemporary trials. In 2010, he was appointed by President Obama and confirmed by the Senate to sit on the board of the Legal Services Corporation. That same year, he was also selected as Executive Director of the Leadership Council on Legal Diversity, and it's in that capacity that he will introduce today's program. He received his BS in 1973 from Virginia Commonwealth University and his JD degree from Washington and Lee, where he currently serves on its Board of Trustees. Michele Mayes is Executive Vice President, General Counsel for Allstate Insurance Company, and is also a member of their senior management team. She's responsible for guiding its strategy to ensure sound compliance with governance policies and fostering a healthy legal, legislative, and regulatory environment. She joined Allstate in 2007, bringing extensive legal, corporate, and government experience there. She previously served as the general counsel for Pitney Bowes and worked in the legal department of Colgate-Palmolive and the Burroughs Corporation. She also served as the U.S. Department of Justice, U.S. Attorney in Detroit and Brooklyn, eventually becoming the chief of the Civil Division in Detroit. She's the recipient of far too many awards for me to list, but I'll just cite a couple. The American Bar Association's Commission on Women in Professions Margaret Brent Award, which is the top award for women, the Minority Corporate Counsel Association Trailblazer Award. She's been recognized as one of America's top minority lawyers by Black Enterprise and the National Law Journal. She also serves on numerous boards, including Legal Momentum, the RAND Corporation, and the ABA Center on Racial and Ethnic Diversity, as well as the Leadership Council. And in her spare time, she writes books. I have here Courageous Counsel, which she just co-authored, which is a series of profiles about other distinguished women general counsel, and I strongly recommend it to all of you. These are obviously extremely busy and overcommitted people, and we are very grateful that they've taken the time to share their thoughts on where the profession is moving with respect to diversity and where it needs to move.
Let me tell you that both of us are card-carrying members of the Deborah Rohde fan club. There are a few people who seek to make a difference. There are even fewer that actually accomplish that. Professor Rohde is one of those. Having had the pleasure of working with her and watching her leadership, you are very lucky to have her here at Stanford. I'm going to step down to the podium and start us off. I am clearly the thorn between two roses, so find my own place. Let me tell you that it is a pleasure to be with you. I think there's nothing more important than the next generation of lawyers in America. You have unique challenges. They are both within the context of the borders of this country and outside of the borders of this country. You are entering a profession that is going to be tested from freedom, liberty, and democracy, to finances, intellectual property, and globalization. It is all going to be on your plate. You are going to be the leaders of the free world under the rule of law. And that has very important meaning today, more so than perhaps ever. And so as you see the changes that are occurring in our global society, recognize that to the degree we achieve order and stability and prosper as a global community, it'll be because of lawyers that are at the helm and leading the way. So it is more important than ever to think about how we develop lawyers, how we develop the vast talent that exists in this country of individuals who want to become lawyers, and to encourage them to be leaders, not only in the profession, but throughout society. And so there was this discussion among general counsel and managing partners that said, while we are doing our individual best to raise the bar on this issue of not only diversifying the profession, but creating an environment where that will flourish and that talent will be fully developed, it is not enough that we do that in our own way. We ought to do this collectively. We ought to do this with the command of resources that we have at our disposal. We ought to do this with the leadership mantle and position that we have in the profession, not tomorrow, but today. And so in 2009, Michele Mayes and others like her came together in a meeting and said, how do we do this together? How do we do this in a constructive way that doesn't wait until tomorrow to see what the results might be? Let's put ourselves in the path of success where the results might be achieved today. And so out of that was formed the Leadership Council on Legal Diversity. Why is it different? How is it something unique? It is made up of general counsel and managing partners as its members. And the only way to become a member is to be a GC or an MP. That's first. It's also the first time that on a collaborative basis at that level, that larger group has been assembled for the sole purpose of talent development with a focus on diversity. This group said, we are really not interested in having a lot of dinners and giving out a lot of awards. Let's see if we can make the rubber meet the road by engaging in programs, projects, and initiatives that we can make a difference with this mission that we have. Excuse me. And so what was born was this concept of leadership in the legal profession. And I'll read to you, this is what the website looks like when you go to it. It's lcldnet.org. But it says, it is the task of this generation of leaders in the law to deepen the commitment to a profession that is increasingly open to talented individuals of all backgrounds. Doors open to diverse backgrounds. This is where we ought to be. This is what we ought to do. This is happening to this generation of leaders. LCLD is broken out into 4 initiatives: pipeline, talent development, benchmark, partnerships, and teams. Pipeline seeks to look at opportunities in developing individuals from law school, from college to law school, from law school to the profession, and then a discussion about how to start a successful career in a law firm or a corporation. This year we had our first program called the 1L Scholars Program, where 1L students were invited to jobs that didn't exist the year before. Clerkships at corporations and at law firms that were new clerkships. Some of them collaborative clerkships, where you served a few weeks in the corporation, a few weeks in the law firm that had the corporation as a client. But we had different iterations of new ideas with a focus on enlarging the pool of those who would have clerkship opportunities in our organizations. About 200 organizations, about 60 corporations, twice as many law firms. Talent development. Okay, you get the pipeline open and you get individuals through the pipeline. Then what happens? We decided that it was important to talk about building the soft skills that are necessary to succeed in our organizations. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. But let's not wait around to see if it happens. Let's try to put individuals in that path of success, of realizing their potential. So we created the Fellows Program. Each corporation was invited to send 2 fellows. These are mid-level attorneys within the corporation. And the same is true with law firms. They are immersed in a year-long program with each other to talk about what it takes to be successful in our various organizations. They get to visit some of our organizations, to have a discussion with those leaders in the organization, to see how and why people succeed, fail, and how do we overcome some of the issues related to becoming indispensable members of the organizations. This is a recognition of the retention issue, where too many of us go through a 5-year cycle and we're out of the law firm, we're out of the corporation, we're out of the profession. So we want to stop that and hitting this light. Benchmark. If you're going to do something, you've got to figure out whether it's working or not. And benchmark is clearly that process where we look at what we're doing, determining whether we're effective with it. We're going to look at our programs, we're going to measure what we're doing. It's going to be both quantitative and qualitative. But the idea is let's look behind the numbers. Let's not get into another survey. Let's not check the box and say, yes, we had 3 minority students this summer, and yes, they did well. Let's look behind that. Let's find out from them what the experience was like. Let's find out from those who were part of their mentoring experience what it was like. Let's make sure that we are not missing opportunities to help people develop, and to make sure that our programs are having the desired effect that we hope they would have. Partnerships and teams connects the dots of all of this. So how do we work collaboratively as an organization? How do we get the corporations and the law firms to engage in this discussion now that we've brought people in the pipeline, now that we've had talent development, now that we're looking at the success of those programs? How then do we mesh and integrate this in a positive experience for both organizations? You will hear more about that from Michele Mayes. The first annual meeting, which was last year, was open, and it was about individuals. This meeting was about building on that, and we want to look at how we build teams within our organizations. How do people become indispensable partners and members of our organization? And from there, as we look forward, we want to look at building successful organizations. Let me show you the quick video clip what we did this year. I've described it to you, but let me let you see those who participated.
Ultimate measurement, in my judgment, of what the meeting means is what happens when you get back to the law firm.
We had a very good year.
To be able to look out on that room and see this fantastic group of high potential people rising in their profession from all the leading companies and law firms. The energy was off the charts, and I think we just got off to a spectacular start. It was sold out in record time. We had 35 spots, so about a third of the fellows got to go. In 40 minutes they signed up and filled up the slots, and it was just a terrific day. Just after the first year and a month together, over time, the power of numbers will work. We're talking about hundreds and then thousands of LCLD fellows.
Part of the program is going to be for the fellows to start to mentor, as we're already doing, students who are behind us, and so that the pipeline discussion around diversity really becomes much more meaningful. It's about creating communities and creating friendships and creating some sort of value out of being a lawyer.
It is really targeted to try to give people that would not maybe necessarily be in the inner circle, but who could and should be, a chance to really get inside the client's mindset, to see how it works, to see what they can do better, what they can learn. When you are interviewing for a coach, you must include a diverse candidate, and if you don't, you will be fined. Doesn't say you have to hire them. So if you have the Rooney Rule and apply it, I suppose we could tweak it and adjust it in some way.
We've set a goal for ourselves. Our goal by the end of this decade is to try to make the representation on our law school campuses as diverse as the individuals who are graduating from colleges and universities. And there's about a 5-point gap right now.
This meeting has been wonderful. To have the opportunity to be in the same conference with great leaders in the field, such as Brad Smith and A.B. Culverhouse.
Our goal is to help these folks succeed. It's an incredibly talented group of people. They are the future of our profession.
And really figure out how do people advance within these organizations, what are the issues that are holding them back, and what can we do to address those questions. And then to go out and test whether the programs that LCLD initiates are really having an impact within the profession. To collect the data from our organizations and interpret it in a way that will allow us to gain new insights as to what's really driving the advancement of women and minorities in the law.
Yeah, I like the word now.
We want to get this done today. We want to get this done now.
Well, I am not the most patient person in the world, and we can't move fast enough.
Give us a chance to give them a leg up, to give them some momentum, some real foundation to say, I'm taking that seat at the table, not just any seat.
slides. I'm going to turn this over to
Is that my cue?
one of the most prominent leaders in the profession, Michele Mayes.
So I have to first commend you on your win over USC. Now, the reason that's such a big joke for me is that even though they had that football clip when they had my picture up there, there's nothing I dislike more than sports. So that was a big joke on me. So not unlike Robert, I am delighted to be here with you this afternoon because I think if you plant the seeds, you never know how and when they're going to grow. And it doesn't necessarily mean that either one of us will be here to see it. Much like, as Robert and I were reminiscing, Thurgood Marshall couldn't tell the road he was traveling so many years ago. There is a quote by Shirley Chisholm, who was the first African-American woman, so far the only one, to run for president. Obviously, she didn't win. But her remark is, the question is not, what is somebody going to do and who is going to do it, she said. Until you ask the question, what are you going to do, you have not begun to be serious about solving a problem. And that is truly what LCLD is about. It's not looking around the room, seeing who's going to bring up the rear. It's whether you're willing to take the lead. That's pretty much what you heard from Vernon Jordan, who is one of the preeminent lawyers in our time, when he says, what are you going to do when you get back to the office? As you may have heard from Robert, I chair the Partnerships and Team Committee, and we've had an interesting journey over the last 18 months. In essence, it's about talent. And I think, as most of you can relate, an individual's talents are not expendable. You can't wait to see, well, maybe it'll be the next person who has that vision. And it's probably no better demonstrated by someone than Steve Jobs. Could anybody have been him, or was there only one? And who wants to take the risk to find that out? And so, in the siege that this country now finds itself under, Robert and the colleagues that I work with on the LCLD are not willing to run that risk. John Pepper spoke at the LCLD annual meeting that was held at the beginning of October. And he tells a very interesting story. John Pepper was the CEO for Procter & Gamble, a couple times removed now. And he's been focused on diversity a large part of his career, but this is the story that he tells. His remark was that he had a very prominent executive, African-American, in the company, and he was watching him from afar as he progressed. And all of a sudden, the gentleman tenders his resignation. Pepper is totally caught off guard. He decides, well, I just have to feed him dinner and I'll change his mind. So he invites the gentleman out to dinner and he implores that he can reconsider his decision because he thinks it's the wrong decision, that he is doing well in the company. He says, I don't understand why you would resign. And the gentleman looks him in the eye and says, John, I hear you, but I never felt in the house. If you don't feel like you belong, that is, you're masking who you really are, or you believe nobody really cares who you are, I think that's when you have people saying, it doesn't matter if I move on. Retention is really not an issue here. So what we decided on the Partnerships Committee, we took on 2 initiatives in the first part of LCLD beginning in 2009, 2010. And let me have the clicker, or are you going to do it for me?
Whatever you want.
So the committee took on secondments, which is what you see up on the screen now. And then I'll talk about the Rooney Rule, which is the next initiative. Denise Keene, who's the executive vice president for Altria, co-chaired this subcommittee along with Jeff Gerhardt, who is the general counsel for Walmart. And while secondments are nothing new, we're not talking about a novel idea. What was novel was to try to target diverse attorneys, women and other minorities, into these secondments, such that, again, they would have a leg up, which is what you heard me say in the video clip you saw earlier. And so we put together a toolkit. We rolled it out. It is being piloted, and I'm not going to go through all the stuff that's in the toolkit, but we tried to set out guidelines, because what we found is that secondments were a little haphazard if you look at the way they had evolved historically. And this was to say you need to give thought to all of these categories. It doesn't mean you necessarily need to have cookie-cutter answers to everything, but just don't leap over the topics that you see on the screen behind me. So we said, let the secondment be at least 3 months. If it's less than 3 months, probably neither side is getting that much. The attorney needs to have a certain number of years' experience. Do not put somebody in a secondment who's a brand new lawyer. The law firm should cover the expenses. You need, and this is really critical, when the attorney goes back to the law firm, you need to have a scorecard that talks about the reentry of that lawyer. The goal of this process is to say that that lawyer maybe will understand, and undoubtedly, not maybe, understand this client better, and will be positioned to either get new assignments or to be brought in on existing assignments, but to have very substantive work because they understand this client much better. The next rule that we went to decide as a signature program was the Rooney Rule, and we called it the Inclusive Impact Statement, a little bit of a takeoff on the Environmental Impact Statement. The co-chairs of that committee were both from law firms. You see them, Vivian Pollack, Ben Wilson. And I want to talk about the Rooney Rule because it was actually in the New York Times a few days ago, talking about whether it had been successful because it was clearly started in the NFL, another favorite topic of mine, the National Football League. I do know that. But one of the goals of it was to make sure that people who might have been overlooked, I would say the unusual suspects, were given a platform to show their skills and to be in the mix when coaches were considered for the different leagues around the country. But I want to share with you another story that Professor Wilkins told that in some way predates the Rooney Rule because this is now in the military. I'm not exactly sure when this arose, but again, it illustrates when you are proactive in reaching out, what can happen. Whoever was over the military, and I can't even tell you who it was, got a slate of who the next generals should be. He looked at the slate, and it was what I call the usual suspects. He turned to his attendant. He said, I'm not appointing any more generals until you bring back a diverse slate. Now, this person froze. He said, what do you mean you're not appointing any more generals? The military is moving on. He said, you heard me. I'm not going to appoint any more generals until you bring me a diverse slate. The guy panicked, ran out the room and proceeded to put together a diverse slate. You can guess probably where this is going. The person who made it onto that list was none other than Colin Powell. He was never in the mix. He was not in the House. I'm not telling you he made it to the ranks of general that first race, but the point was he was now in the consciousness of the people who were making considerations about who should be generals. We know how that story ended. And so if you look at the Rooney Rule, we're asking law firms and inside counsel, general counsel, to be very deliberate when they're looking at engagement, hiring and promotion. It doesn't matter that you are consciously trying to say, is my slate diverse? So even within my department, I have to look at when I have critical positions open, typically that means either senior positions or officer positions, to say, did I look where I always look for individuals, or did I go deeper? At the end of the day, we put together a white paper and guidelines for both law firms and law departments to say, this is the process we'd like you to consider. The critical thing they must do is an annual certification. It is signed by 2 people within that organization, whether it's the law firm or the law department, that says when I had critical jobs open, whether it's on the management committee for the law firm, an officer job, head of litigation, whatever it happens to be, I am certifying that I had a diverse slate. Much like I said in the video clip, it does not mean that person was selected, but it does mean they were legitimate candidates on that slate. We are piloting both the secondment process and the Rooney Rule. If you look up there, you will see the organizations that have agreed to do it. There are no easy answers to any of this. I think Robert alluded to this, if not here, earlier today when we were speaking. There is no one-size-fits-all. There is no guarantee that any of this is going to deliver immediately. But I will guarantee you, if you do nothing, you will get nothing. And so we've committed to experiment with this. Some things will have to be changed. My goal is to fail fast, learn from it, and move on. So I can tell you right now there's some things that we've done that we have not been totally pleased with. That has not stopped our momentum. It has just forced us to assess it, determine what we have learned from it, to pick it up and move the ball forward. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say to you. Again, there is no one answer to any of this, and the jury is out, but we're determined to keep the pace that we've got going at this moment. Robert?
Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to close with this. We had our second annual meeting. I think I'm going to close with this. Let me see if it'll work here. We had our second annual meeting. You saw what was the open and a discussion about what happened the first year. We had this second annual meeting. No one has seen this yet. So this is hot off the press. You're the first audience for this. But this is a conclusion of what happened in September. I'm Robert Gray, Executive Director of the Leadership Council on Legal Diversity. One of the highlights of this past year was our second annual meeting, which took place in Washington, D.C. in September. General counsels and managing partners from more than 100 LCLD member organizations came together for robust discussions, thought-provoking panels, and inspiring presentations. At this year's meeting, our chair, Rick Palmore, raised the bar by launching the BUILD initiative. This will expand our programs into even higher levels of the legal profession, including the all-important building of teams in LCLD member organizations. Focusing on these dynamics will benefit not only rising attorneys of diverse backgrounds, but also the organizations themselves, who stand to prosper from the wisest use of that talent.
Well, there'll be no more important point I make, and you know it, and that's why you're here. Senior leadership, genuine, unyielding leadership, leadership demanding plans and accountability like any other part of the business. This is the key. And that has to be rooted in the deeply felt conviction that diversity and inclusion are fundamental predicates to sustaining a successful future.
Number one metric on which our success or failure will rest is whether our law school enrollments become more diverse. There's no way the legal profession is going to become more diverse unless our law school student bodies become more diverse.
And so all of this work that we're doing now is talking about building people that will have the ability to step into the chairs many of us occupy now.
But over time, with this organization working, and with the members supporting the program, we're going to build an army of LCLD fellows. And they're going to have a common experience of having gone through this program that I'm sure will evolve over time as the world changes, and it will get better and better and better.
This is an amazing opportunity, and we're so excited to be here and to work with you to push the initiative that your brain power has already created.
If you're already an LCLD member, you'll find more about the meeting and additional resources on our members' website, including a members' toolkit and the full presentations made at the annual meeting. And if you're not a member, we invite you to join us in building a better legal profession, one that is strong and diverse as the country itself. Thank you.
That's it.
That was just terrific. Thank you. Let me open the floor for questions by inviting, first of all, Larry Kramer, our dean, to say a few words about the event and perhaps throw out the first interrogative pitch.
Oh, thanks. This is my punishment. I apologize. I got stuck in the
That's, stuff happens when you're a dean.
So actually, I will ask the question that we talked about a little at lunch. So, which is, at this point where the profession has gone, is all the center of gravity is with the clients and not with the law firms anymore? And that is to say, you can see all the pressures that law firms are under are coming from the clients because legal departments have grown, gotten more sophisticated, and are in a position to put pressure on firms. But I am curious to get a little bit more information about what's happening within the legal departments themselves in terms of, you know, and we talked a little, what percentage of the practicing profession or even the big law practicing profession is in-house versus in firms? How diverse are the in-house offices? What are they doing to increase diversity in-house, especially since they won't hire people straight out of law school? So to the extent that you have this whole attrition problem that's happening in the first few years, there may not even be the opportunity because you're looking at smaller populations. So that set of issues I would be interested in getting some coverage.
If you held up a mirror to my department, I would tell you that I don't have bragging rights, but it isn't that we are not extremely focused on it, and that's certainly the first step. So I want to talk about leadership because I know that Deb has a course that you're teaching on leadership. And it truly does start with leadership. And I think for too long, people didn't really think of that as something that we should be heavily invested in, that you learn the Uniform Commercial Code and you learn what the tax law had. But if you call it the soft skills, those are actually the harder skills. And each of us, as we've matured, notice I didn't say get old, but as we've matured, we have come to appreciate much more deeply that it really is all about the people. And so one of the initiatives that we've had within Allstate for the 4 years I've been there is really being very rigorous on putting in systems that look at the career of an in-house lawyer from beginning to end. So that includes everything from developing competencies that are very behaviorally based. It includes looking at performance management and how the tough feedback is given. It includes mentoring and succession planning. You can't leave off any of that. And we've put a process in place that makes sure that none of that is left off. But it is something you have got to be vigilant about because it is easy to give it lip service and not to deliver. That is helping us tremendously to put people in jobs that you would have not considered them for if you weren't being more apt to look at people that are off the beaten path. And that has definitely occurred. So I've got a much more robust pipeline of diverse lawyers in the queue now. Does that answer your question, Dean?
Yeah, although just by way of follow-up, the question is why, you know, well, so one is how widespread is that? And then two is, why not consider changing some of the hiring practices? Think about taking people straight out of law school and bearing some of the training costs. To say that we've seen the opposite effect, which is that we won't even pay for the first and second year associate time, which of course creates pressure then on the firms to hire fewer young associates, to put less into training them rather than more because they can't get compensated for it from clients. That whole set of problems, and you know,
And I'll be interested for Robert to respond. The Development Committee really is the committee that's looking at the elements of a career and what it takes to have a successful one. But go back to your remark about not hiring lawyers right out of law school. There is a bias that says you don't get well trained if you go in-house right away, that it's really not the smart way to start your career. We selectively hire out of law school. Not a large number of students. I told you it's somewhere between 2 and 3, so you're not talking about a groundswell. But we do take students that are straight out of school. You have to work extra hard to get them the grounding that you think they deserve in order to not miss something because they've got a captive client. And that is something, you know, that's the yin and the yang. There's always something about what you decide to do. So I think that's one element where there are selective places where we realize we have to do it. But go to the law firm model that says, oh, please don't give me a first-year student who doesn't know anything except how to do research for 10 hours that I don't want to pay for. I think part of the model that has to be challenged, and we have done this, is to say, well, why do you want to charge that much for that person? And if it's so critical for that individual to be in the learning phase, to get up on the curve, why don't you not charge me the same rate and you eat it, dear partner, if it's so critical to you? And so we've asked law firms and said, you can do it, you just can't charge me the rate you would typically charge me.
Thank you so much, both of you, for your talk today. I wanted to ask, how do you ensure that race doesn't become the only measure of diversity? Because this is my 6th year at Stanford, and I've seen so many of these diversity programs as an undergrad and as a master's student, and it seems like often a lot of them, if you're African American, Hispanic, Asian, they're a lot more accessible. But there's so many other aspects to diversity, right? There's religion, economic background, academic interests. So just in both of your practices, if you could tell me, how you take account of that, and maybe if you can comment on what you envision happening in the future.
I'll take a stab at that. It is I think it is a fact of life that our diversity in this country comes in many different forms. We are not going to be successful unless we embrace everyone who is a part of this experience. We can't do this alone, and we can't do this by isolating people out of the mix of the focus of our organizations. In other words, diversity can't be collateral. It can't be ancillary. It's got to be part of the DNA. It's got to be part of the desire of organizations to say, we're going to explore all the talent that's available to us. This is taking a broad view of the opportunity. And I think that involves politics, involves religion, it involves everything. That whenever you come to the table, you are an individual of diverse background, whether you are white, whether you are black, whether you are brown, whether you are Catholic or Episcopalian or Jewish or whatever you are. And while we are looking at the effort to expand this model, we also want to look at what traditionally have been barriers to particular individuals in particular categories, and to say, if we're going to achieve a broad base of diversity, we've got to create balance within that approach. And so those that don't get opportunities need to see opportunities for themselves in order to fully participate. Michele indicated that we're going to try different things and we're going to work at this on a collaborative basis. But you can't succeed by creating silos. You've got to do this experiment in the laboratory with everybody there. If I'm in a law firm that is majority minority, and I want to hire a majority person because I feel it's important that we have a broader base within the firm, that's an important step for that organization to take. And quite frankly, I've been there because I had my own firm, and I did diversify in reverse. And it was important to me. So as we look at the expansion of our organizations, as we look at diversity, as we look at the characteristics of our organizations, the idea is that this country has a finite group with which to draw from. And we're not getting our fair share of the talent in a diverse fashion, in a diverse pool. We want to expand that. We want to make sure that happens. And then once it happens, to take advantage of it, to make sure it matriculates, to make sure women and other minorities have a way to and a path to the top. Because if we do it together, if we do it collaboratively, if we do it recognizing that we all win with that scenario, we're a much stronger profession. We're much less likely to be criticized for not allowing everyone to participate, but we are more likely to get the best talent that this country has to offer. We're not in this by ourselves anymore. This is not a static profession. China wants to be larger than the U.S. in 10 years in the number of lawyers. We do $8 trillion worth of business with China. Do you think they want to, you think they're going to, the idea to have the same number of lawyers in America is to take that money back. This is a competitive environment. We should not leave any talent on the table. That's our motto. Don't leave it there. Take it with you.
Let me just make a couple comments. Well, there's a you had your hand up. So did you want to ask a question? I want to hear what you guys say. One of the things that Robert said I want to underscore, but I also want to talk about history because I think it matters. This country, if you look at the stats, whether you're looking at women or minorities, it depends on which group of minorities, but generally, they simply are not rising to the top at the same rate you would assume if you look at the pool of availability. You cannot turn your back on that. I think you have to, again, if you look at partners in law firm or general counsels in the Fortune 500, it is a pretty paltry number. But having said that, it is critical that you not make this, we versus them. To me, it means everybody does need to be at the table. So if you look at the committee, and I want to talk about the committee at Allstate, it's called Vital Communities. It is not called diversity. It is not called inclusiveness. It is called Vital Communities. And the belief is if you have a system that is supportive of everyone trying to reach their full potential, it doesn't matter what color, what economic stratosphere, it doesn't matter. It is everyone at the table trying to row in that direction. So the Vital Communities Committee is headed by a white guy. It was very important to me that it couldn't be just the women, because, it's all about us, or just about the minorities, African Americans versus Hispanics. That doesn't work. It is everybody at the table. Because the minute you have divisiveness kick in, you've got all the foundation for stopping progress. Wanted to say something?
Could you say a little more about the benchmarking aspect of the program, and particularly who is going to be benchmarked? Is it just people who volunteer, or are you going to have a broader base of law firms that are going to be subjected to these metrics?
So Michele said some of the times we take a shot at something, we don't exactly get it right. And we took a shot at benchmark. And while I'm not going to say we weren't pleased with the result, we felt that it wasn't distinguishable in terms of the measuring that we were going to do. So we're going to take another crack at this year. We also haven't gotten you've got to give your committees time to get up and running to also figure out what you're measuring. And so we realized we might have gotten the cart a little bit before the horse with this idea of what we're going to measure. As a matter of fact, Michele had a tool to measure. She didn't mention this, and I said, Michele, don't do that yet. Let's get some of this on the ground before we start measuring, because if we don't do this in a holistic way, we're going to end up with being accused of saying, well, you just did that one piece and that's selective and you can make a case for that, but what about the larger piece? And so you've hit sort of the Achilles heel, if you will, but we're not going to shy away from it. What we're going to do is we're going to do some tracking first. We're going to look at people who are going through our 1L Scholars Program, through our Fellows Program, through the implementation of the Inclusion Impact Statement, ideas with regard to secondments, and see what level of participation we're getting, and get some feedback, some quantitative feedback on that. And then work with our members to produce some qualitative analysis of that. But we recognize that what we don't want to do is over-survey people. What we don't want to do is get to the point where it's just some more numbers. We talked about getting behind the numbers. For example, we do a lot of surveys now where we ask, well, how many women were on my file? And how many do you have in your law firm? And how many are in this practice group? What we don't ask are, of the top 25 cases from a revenue standpoint that you tried this year, how diverse were the teams and what role did they play? Of the top 10 transactions, the highest revenue transactions, how diverse were the teams on those transactions and what role did they play? Of the top 25 rainmakers and their activity lists, how diverse were the teams that they used to produce the results they produce, and what role did they? So we're trying to figure out, how do you not just survey to be surveying, gathering information so that you can say you have it, as opposed to finding information that is going to provide some feedback that'll be helpful in, as Michele said, looking in the mirror and saying, am I really am I making progress, or am I pretending that I'm making progress? And if I'm making progress, then I want to be able to say, here are the areas where I believe this firm or this corporation is leading. Or if we're not, we need to work on that area because it doesn't show any progress at this particular point. So it's a very good question, and we're trying to be very thoughtful about how we approach it.
You may have already answered part of my question, but my observation kind of from inside the law firm universe is that corporate counsels on an individual level have had an increasing impact on the behavior of the firms, moving us to revise comp structures, to present more diversified and inclusive teams, not just paying lip service, but putting people into roles. And I guess I'm interested, I was interested in seeing the certification element of the Rooney Rule slide, and kind of prompted me to wonder, you know, what's the level of adoption of that, you know, at the leadership council level, and how you see that, and you know, the benchmark seems like it's another element of how you might begin to really put a more influence on the firms. I wonder if you could maybe talk about that.
Well, one of the beliefs is that since the clients pay the bills, firms listen to us. There's some truth to that. But I think what Robert and I also recognize is that it needs to be collaborative. And when we rolled out the inclusive impact rule, what I was surprised by is that I didn't have a rush through the door for people to sign up for the pilot. I thought I'd have a lot more companies and firms saying, me first. And so we're trying to get behind that, and we started to do it at the last annual meeting a couple of months ago, inquiring why certain firms had not signed up yet. There's some things we need to modify in the rule they have concerns about. So let me give you an example. And I went, you know, that's a good point. Because they're taking the certification seriously. Like most lawyers, we don't sign things easily unless we say, yeah, I'm living into it. And that was one of the reasons for making it a John Hancock exercise. The concern that was voiced is that many firms also do lateral hiring. Lateral hiring is much more complex than if you're going out doing the recruiting, because people frequently come to you. It isn't necessarily that it's a diverse person. What do you do if it isn't? And so they wanted a lot more elaboration about how this certification would work if lateral hiring took place, because it was not excluded from the certification process. So once we understood that this was a stumbling block, we're going to go back and really try to tease that apart. But coming to the underlying assumption, clients carry a big stick. It may not always be the right stick. And that's something where we've got to be as receptive to listening to our law firms, because let me tell you one of the unintended consequences that we haven't talked about this afternoon. If I say I want a diverse slate on all state work, and there happens to be a limited pool of either women or minorities in the firm, and I've got the biggest stick because I pay the most money, which is true for most of the firms I'm talking about, I'm one of their bigger clients, well, are all the diverse people going to skew to my work only? Is that good for the firm? Is it good for the individual? And so when you stop and pause, you go, well, maybe that's not so smart. Although I do want diverse people on my file, did I mean to have it skewed that lopsidedly? So those are the types of things, if the firms are bold enough to tell us, and they are, you've got to step back and say, maybe this is a little more complex than I'm giving it credit for.
What it represents is getting into process, asking to see results.
That's true.
And that's what I think is interesting. There are processes that elicit better results than others.
That's exactly right.
Going down a slope there.
I very much like the Rooney Rule and the secondments and the fellowships, and it seems to be a great way to develop these young attorneys starting out in their career. I'm drawn to Brad Smith's comment, though, from Microsoft, who said, if the law school demographics don't change, it puts enormous limitations on our ability to achieve anything in the profession. And so does your program reach into junior high school, college, and how do you envision the focus on these young professionals I like so much? How do you envision that changing the 50,000 people who are accepted to law school each year? Because I look at those stats, 100,000 apply, 50,000 get in, and I'm not seeing the change I'd like to see. So is there anything about your program that can help change 50,000, and how?
I wish there was a silver bullet I could just fire out there and say, oh, this is exactly how we're going to do it. It's going to be a combination of things, and it's a little bit of trial and error. Right now we have, so Brad has formed a law dean's roundtable. He's talking to them about things that would be helpful. One of the ideas that has come up and that is going to be piloted is we're going to work with Phi Alpha Delta and Clio. Phi Alpha Delta has the network, Clio has the program, to try to bring some scale to developing those who would be interested in going to law school, but putting some rigor, more rigor, into that process so that they might be more successful in their application and getting in. We have identified through our members 500 mentors. We're going to put them to work this year and put them into the law school environment to talk and to work with law students so that there is some discussion about what it takes to be successful, and so that you've got somebody to talk to if you want to. And if we don't try to do that, then we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to say, what are we doing? Now, the pipeline is a big space, and we've got to think about what we can do as a 180-member group, which is about what the size of a law school class, and we're trying to affect the entire profession. But if we're successful at some of these programs and they start to evolve and we can find new ways to improve it, scale may be something we can focus on down the road. But we got to try something, and we got to see if we can use existing resources and collaborate with those who are already on the ground to make a difference, as opposed to trying to create it out of whole cloth. That helps.
Let me just mention one thing, and then what we've done at Allstate, because sometimes we go ahead and do things outside of LCLD, and we talk about whether LCLD can actually in some way latch onto it. But there is one program, because I am extremely cognizant of the fact that the pipeline is one of the keys. I heard this, I was in a class with wardens in the federal penitentiary system, 2 different wardens. And somebody asked them, how do you decide when to build more jails, more prisons? And I will never forget this answer. We look to see who is failing the 3rd grade. That's writing somebody off pretty early. And so when I looked at the work that we had been doing at Allstate, it was focusing a lot on college and law school. We decided to go back into high school. That's probably not early enough either, frankly. Junior high seems to be an inflection point. That's when a lot of people get into the criminal justice system. But what we have embraced is the urban debate program. It's been peer-reviewed. More minorities, particularly males, because we are losing more males to the prison system than they graduate from high school. Once you get in that system, it is very hard to get out. But what we've decided is that if you can get males into this system, they're far more likely to graduate from high school and far more likely to go on to college. So we have taken on debate leagues, 3 of them around the country, heavily invested in the one in Chicago. So I will tell you this, the league that I first got involved with, the young man, first generation Mexican-American, won the championship and went to the White House to meet with Obama. Full ride to college. And so when you see stories like this, even though you can say it's a ripple on a pond, it really does multiply. And that's what I'm saying for the kids that have gotten interested in the debate leagues. It's only one answer, but it's a pretty powerful answer for us. Okay, you have a question.
Yeah, last question.
I guess this question relates more to in-house counsel than firms, but how do you ensure, or do you ensure or encourage companies that partner with your secondment program or other initiatives to value diversity throughout the organization beyond just their legal department? And the reason I'm asking this question is I noticed that the GC of Walmart was one of your chairs for the secondment program. And Walmart, of course, we all know, was a defendant of one of the largest gender discrimination class actions. And not to pass judgment on whether or not they were discriminating in their hiring practices, and this is not in their legal department, but how do you make sure that organizations that you partner with are embracing these values as a whole, which of course would have some spillover effects within their legal departments?
This first of all, we don't do a litmus test about whether whether the organization itself is doing something or not. This is really general counsel and managing partners. And quite frankly, if somebody's being bad, you know, I'd rather have them in the house than outside the house so I can do something with them. I don't know that, I think if a company is found to be intentional in large-scale discrimination, then I think then the board is going to have to assess that. You know, it's just going to have to take that into consideration as part of whether that person remains a member or not. The other side of that coin is this is complicated. We have got more to do than we can put our arms around. We need to have everybody that can provide leadership, that can provide resources to affect that change. Many times, it's some part of the organization that provides leadership for the other parts of the organization. General counsel's office provides guidance to the rest of the corporation in a positive way. You want them there. You want them to participate. It is. I don't know that we're ever going to be perfect in what we do, but I think we have got to bring everybody to the table to have these discussions.
It's a good question. I just want to make this remark and I'll quit. What you do find is that companies that come up short get wisdom much faster.
A useful point to make, and I'll just close with one story that I think kind of captures the spirit of the occasion, and Michelle's story about the general who wouldn't make any more appointments until he got a diverse slate reminded me of one of my favorite Thurgood Marshall stories when I was clerking for him. He had been sent overseas when General MacArthur was running the Asian military operation in a not very inclusive way, to say the least. And there were all sorts of concerns about not just, you know, promotions and responses to discrimination within the military, but also in court-martials and a whole range of other issues. And Marshall, after spending a couple weeks, finally got a meeting with the general and pointed out some of the problems to him, and then noted that, among other things, there were no officers of color in the entire headquarters staff. And MacArthur explained that, as he had for all the other problems. There was just no one who was qualified. Marshall said, well, that's so interesting. I noticed also that the military marching band seems to be all white. Now, just between you and me, General, are you telling me there's no African American who can play a horn? You know, it's asking those questions to people in power and forcing them at times to come out of their comfort zone and really engage with the challenges before us that's made the Leadership Council so special. And we are deeply grateful that you took the time to share those insights with us today. So we have a reception in the back, and please stay and, outside? Join us for that. So thank you again.
I'd also like to do this, Professor Rohde, since it's customary. One of the things I learned in being part of what was the ABA's Rule of Law initiative is that traveling to other parts of the world, meeting lawyers and ministers of justice, it's very customary that when you go there, you take a gift and you receive a gift. I mean, it is international custom. Michele and I are very appreciative of the opportunity to be here. We would not leave here without providing a gift to you. And so as part of the Build initiative, we actually wore these at the last annual meeting. I thought it appropriate that you not only have that, but have one of our kits to go with your hard hat and tell you how much we appreciate being with you, and hope that some of the students in this room will be general counsel and managing partners of the largest law firms and corporations in America. Thank you.